Hello, I'm Nick Yakabuchi, and our next review is the horror film Splice. This movie opened nationwide on Friday, June 4th, 2010, and it stars Academy Award winner Adrien Brody, Sarah Polley, and Delphine Shannick. This film comes to us from director Vincenzo Natali, director of previous films such as Paris I Love You and The Straight-to-Video Cypher. Director Vincenzo Natali, gosh, that's just fun to say. Vincenzo Natali. He has collaborated with writer Antoinette Terry Bryant for both story and screenplay credit in bringing this feature to the screen. Now, our story begins by telling us of the two most known and popular scientists or geneticists currently working. Adrien Brody's Clive and Sarah Polley's Elsa seem to be almost rock stars in the field of science and even have made it to the covers of many mainstream magazines. They have created and engineered two rather large organisms that, when combined in what can only be described as a mating ritual, seems to unlock several doors in the evolution of disease research. They have chosen to splice this new creature with the DNA of animals, and at this point it has yielded nothing except positive results. They then in turn want to take this to the next level by splicing it with the DNA of human beings, but are emphatically told by their sponsors and/or backers not to cross into that field just yet. The ever-curious and adventurous Elsa then pretty much takes matters into her own hands and starts the process anyway. After not much debate from Clive, they then venture into unknown scientific territory under the simple guise of, what's the worst that can happen? They then take viable embryos and add those to the cloning chamber spliced with human DNA. In a very rapid period, the embryo takes and begins to grow. It actually matures almost years in just a fraction of the time. Soon enough, a girl is produced, and shortly thereafter, they name it Dren, which is the word nerd spelled backwards. Dren is extremely strong, she is an astonishing jumper, and has a retractable claw out of her tail. And just in case you guys were wondering, no, she is not a velociraptor from Jurassic Park. Dren is actually a fascinating character in the beginning of the film, and the only point of sympathy and compassion throughout the film as well. Now, to start by saying that this is one of the year's worst films would be an insult to the year's worst films. Right off the bat, there is the always present God complex that accompanies movies like this time and time again. I really would like to understand what gives somebody the right to challenge God's plan and to alter and produce an abomination that could never ever survive in this world that it was brought into. Many times in the feature, they debate on whether or not to terminate Dren, and a couple of times it's even attempted. Each one of these disturbing scenes only added to the empathy that you feel for Dren. Throughout this project, she is drugged, gassed, chained up as a prisoner, probed, and physically maimed. There is no way to blame someone for being born, and even less blame can be assigned to a being for wanting to survive, because heck, it's the one instinct that all living creatures seem to possess. This movie Splice reminded me of the recent film Repo Men in two ways. One, it's absolutely dreadful. And two, how is any member of the audience supposed to root for these two people that have absolutely no moral or ethical code whatsoever? There are many times throughout this film when the actions of our leads border on criminal, and the term mad scientist came to mind more than a few times. This all seems to go back to the theory of creating life and being able to control it. I still think that Jeff Goldblum put it best as Dr. Malcolm from the aforementioned Jurassic Park. He states that power of that kind is unattainable because, put simply, life will not be contained because life always finds a way. Now to the most uncomfortable and displeasing part of this depressing movie occurs going into its third act. On a whole, it wasn't all that bad till the filmmakers introduced the addition of sex into our story. Adrien Brody's Clive is somehow seduced by Dren, and then it goes full board into a torrid sex scene between a human being and this thing. I mean, people, this is just weird and very, very uncomfortable. And are you ready for this? Because it actually gets worse. The creature of Dren then morphs and alters yet again, and then hooks up and gets lucky for a second time in this film in just a few minutes. You know, for something that's a bald, vagina head-looking, tail-swinging, crossbred creature with its knees bent backward, she does pretty well playing the field. I was really surprised. The last thing I can say about Splice is that it started with a good premise, but it went absolutely nowhere. The whole thing was also very reminiscent of the movie King Kong. They took this creature and put it into an environment in which there's no possible way for it to survive, and then when it all goes wrong, nobody wants to take any kind of responsibility for their actions, saying, "'Twas beauty that killed the beast." This movie also kind of ends the same, with one of our characters venturing down a very questionable path, and I once again wondered why the irresponsible and immoral actions of these people were so predominant throughout this film. They always just seem to hide every bad action under the simple statement, what's the worst that can happen? Well, in my opinion, the worst that could happen is this could be an overwhelming success. They could make a sequel to this absolute dung heap, and I might have to waste another 1 hour and 40 minutes of my life on that. Only 1 star out of 4 for this ridiculousness. And remember, people, I'm not always right, only when it comes to the movies. And thank you for your attention.